the co-host. You should have just seen a recording in progress, and that's thanks to Claire Castell, who's our tech host tonight, and without whom we wouldn't be able to do this. So
How do you get that off of there?
you just, there's a little button to click and it should go away.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you don't want to have yourself show this will be put on a YouTube channel, by the way, then just turn off your camera. Okay. Well, we've got wonderful stories tonight. And one of the things that we get to celebrate tonight is Lunar New Year, which was just this past weekend, January 20, over the weekend, 21st, Saturday, Sunday. People were celebrating. And so we're going to start off with a suite of stories that are related to the Lunar New Year. And our first storyteller is going to be Bobby Kincaid. And Bobby was, as she, I think, will explain, at the Asian Art Museum as a storyteller with me and many others, and has developed a wonderful repertoire of stories around that. So Bobby, please share a little bit of your wonderful repertoire.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, especially Liz and Sally and Claire for doing this, and all the listeners and other storytellers. I love folk tales. You don't know who started them. You don't know where they came from. They do cross the countries, and as they age, some of them are very, very old. They get better and better, and because people adapt and exaggerate and embroidery, and sometimes they fracture them, just making them better and better, and they grow and grow. I'm not a folklorist that says every word has to be said exactly how it's written, because folktales are word by word through the voice to other people with gestures and smiles, and things that aren't expected. And I've done this in this, I have a 4-part series. I did tell it at the Asian Art Museum in the 20s and 2011 in the Shanghai exhibit. And then I told it at Kathy Dana's swap when she had one going. And so tonight, and the Asian Art Museum, that was a castle of storytelling. And I was so lucky when I got there. My world just blossomed. Stories about all the lovely little Asian cultures across there. And I learned so much. And so I've kind of put together, this is a Chinese, of course, because they're Lunar New Year. And as everybody knows, you can tell a story, but everybody tells the story a little bit different. So tonight we're going to learn why there is even time. Okay, a long, long time ago, we can't even measure it. It was so long. People say China's only 8,000 years old, but it's ancient. So up in the heavens, there were these gods. Oh, they were busy. They were loving creating. They had creations blowing around in the air. They had creations all over the floors. The tables were just stacked with creations. And pretty soon the chief god looked at everybody. Hey, we have to do something about organizations. And they all stopped and they looked at each other and they said, yeah, it's getting kind of tight in here and we stumble over each other. So one of them suggested, let's go down to the middle kingdom and let's find us a very organized person. Well, they searched and pretty soon they came upon this prince. Now, this prince was organized. His room was immaculate. His hat was clean. His nose stitching was out of place on his robes. His shoes were immaculate. He could draw. He could write poetry. He read their books. He was organized and they all loved him. So pretty soon the chief god came down and said, Prince, would you be our organizer? He said, oh, it would be such an honor. So they took him up to heaven and they asked him to be their god. And I gave him this huge long name. And I'm only going to say the August John emperor of the beginning of time. And so he started. He was very excited, and he first of all, he divided the heavens into 36 spaces. So each god had their own space. And then he put all their things on drawers and on shelves, and they can do all their creating. Of course, he had to go back and clean up all the time. And then he got busy with the solar system. And they had the planets all over buzzing around, but he put the sun, and then he put all the planets, and they were in their line. And he looked at Earth, and he just really liked Earth. It was blue, and it was glowy, and it was full of life. So he went down and he organized the insects and the animals and the birds and the fish, even the humans, into arrangements and categories. And he was very satisfied with himself, except there was no movement. So he swirled his hands around like this, and the universe started whirling. And he watched it. And it took it 12 months to go around. It started the Earth. He was watching the Earth in particular. Started at Juniper, and in 12-month cycles, that meant there was a moon on Earth. And then the Earth would open up, and then the moon would open up and then close. It took it 12 times to go around. And then he noticed as the Earth turned, there was day and night, which also took about 12 hours. So he had this brilliant idea. He said, oh, 12s Earth will have 12 months, because it came back to Juniper. And he said, the year can start again. And it had the 12 months with seasons. They all worked out with winter, summer, fall, spring. He said, this will start in the spring, because that's when it lined up with Juniper again. So he was very, very pleased with himself. And so were the people on the Earth, because then they had time. They knew what day was night and day with their 12 hours. They knew what month it was, because it would grow big and it'd grow smaller. But he knew something wasn't quite right. There was a little bit of problem, because he expected them to have a party every year, and they were not having a party. So he sent his chief minister down to Earth to find out what was happening. Well, when the year came around, the new year, everybody hid. And he noticed that this awful creature was hungry. It had big teeth, called Nyan, would come, and he would scare everybody and eat the crops and eat their food. Well, as he investigated, that was the last year, and he didn't want to give up. So he had a plan, this minister did, and he went up to the jade god, and he said, emperor, and he said, I have a plan. Is it okay if I work it out? He said, oh, yes, I trust you. You're really, really good. So he went back and he found a village, and everybody was gone but this one old grandma. She was sitting on his porch, and first he was very, very young, and he thought, oh, I'll just get older and older. And he hobbled up to her and he said, can I help you, old lady? She said, well, sure. She says, that monster's going to come, but I don't care. I'm tired of hiding from him. He said, okay, this is what we're going to do. You have any red? Oh, she said, I have lots of red cloth. So they went out and he spread red cloth all over, and he put it on her door, and he made himself this costume with it rustled up, and it was really kind of fun. He said, do you have bamboo like my caning? Oh, yeah, it grows in the garden. She went out and they cut the bamboo up into a little strip. And he says, now take a burning coal and put in each of the pieces of bamboo and put it outside. He said, I notice you have this wonderful chopping board where you make meatballs for the new year. And she said, yeah. She said, yeah. So he said, let's push it up to the window. And when you hear the banging going off outside, use your 2 cleavers and make as much noise as you can. So he said, okay. And they waited, and here came this horrible Nyang last year monster, and he was ready to devour. He was eating the animals in the food, and he was rummaging the houses. And all of a sudden he saw this red door. Well, he was afraid of red. And then the red started flapping back and forth. And then all of a sudden these firecrackers started going off. And this creature was beside himself. And then the old grandma inside started whacking on her her cutting board, making this huge, hideous noise. So the last that she saw of Shang Yu, he was chasing after this Nan creature, chasing him up. And she said they actually floated. And the villagers came back by that time because they heard all the noise. And they said, yes, both of them actually floated up and disappeared into the clouds. Well, this made the Jade Emperor just really happy because now the people could have a New Year's feast. And as it developed, they had the firecrackers, and they would blast those off. And they had red, they used red for everything, paintings, cloth, money that they gave away. And they also had their meatballs. And it was there. And they made a drum instead of whacking on a cutting board, they had a drum. So this went along for a long time. And in the process, there was this very unhappy dragon and this young girl heard him crying every year about the same time. He just was just so sad. And she says, "Grandmother, I'm going to go invite him to our year's party." And she said, "No, you're not." He said, "Yes, I am." So of course she snuck away at night and she went up. And there was this dragon. Oh, he was so miserable. He was puffing and puffing around and he was crying, and she approached him. "I want to invite you to our year's party." She says, "It's a birthday party for everybody and for the next year that's coming." And he looked at her. "You want me to come to a party?" And with that, more tears gushed down. And he rushed down to the, he rushed down the hill and he joined the party and he paraded around and danced. And so that's how we now have the dragon always comes to the New Year's party and he prances around. Well, this really pleased the Jade Emperor, but there was still something wrong. The people could not count the years. So next time I come, I'm going to tell you part 2 of this story and how the animals were invited to this party. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you, Bobby.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Lovely, lovely. What a great way to get started. So much imagination. Definitely
I'm
take
going to
us on a journey. So our journey will continue with our featured teller this month, and that is Linda Yamoto. And Linda, I'm just so happy to introduce Linda to any of you who don't know her already. Linda and I are neighbors. That's really cool. But mainly, Linda has so many talents and has contributed so much in so many ways to our storytelling community here in the Bay Area that we'd be here. I just can't even, you can only scratch the surface, but I will tell you that some of the most important ways are that for 30 years, she was a naturalist at the East Bay Regional Park District. And Linda was Ranger Linda, known to thousands of children and families at the Tilden Nature Center. And Linda is the reason, at least as far as I know, I'm not saying no one else, but Linda's the real reason that the Bay Area Storytelling Festival could take place in the East Bay Regional Park District for the many decades that it did. And anyway, through her naturalist work, she realized that storytelling was such a great tool amongst many others to really get kids excited and engaged. And with the Bay Area Storytelling Festival, we all became part of those Linda's children, I feel like. And Linda's received the Regional Gem Honor from the Storytelling Association of California, which is the sponsor of this Zoom. The fact that we get to do this on Zoom. And she is a storyteller at the Asian Art Museum. And she's also, one of her newer things during the pandemic is she's part of a nationwide group of Asian American storytellers who call themselves or putting on something called Storytopia, which are videos on YouTube. And she'll be putting the information on that in the chat after she tells us some more Lunar New Year stories. So welcome, Linda.
Thanks, Liz and Sally. Thanks so much for the invitation. Just like Bobby said, how folk tales travel from one part of the world to another, and there's so many different variations. So now you get to hear a version of how those animals were chosen for the calendar, right? Long, long ago, the Jade Emperor sat on his throne. He was so pleased because he had just created a lunar calendar, a sky calendar made up of 12 years to help the people keep track of time. But he was a bit worried that the people down on Earth would have a hard time remembering which year was which. So he decided he would name each year after one of his animals. But I have so many wonderful animals. How am I going to choose? I know. I will have a contest. I will have all the animals come to my palace and they will parade in front of me. I will look at each one of them carefully and think about their traits, and I will choose them. Let's see, I will choose one who is the most beautiful, one who is the most swift, one who is the most intelligent. Yes, that's what I will do. I will choose 12 animals for 12 different traits. Well, when the animals heard about this contest, they were so excited. They each wanted to be chosen as one of the 12. Well, Rooster was sure he would be chosen as the most beautiful because he had a beautiful red comb, beautiful shiny feathers, and back then he had coral antlers at the top of his head as well. But Dragon, he wasn't so sure about himself because even though Dragon was a very splendid creature, he had a bald head and he was very sensitive about it. He would complain to his friend Centipede. Oh, Centipede, only if I had coral antlers like Rooster, then no one would notice my bald head. They don't even notice my golden scales or my long tail. They just stare at my bald head. Well, Caterpillar was a rather sly worm-like creature back then. He was rather tricky and didn't have a lot of friends, but Dragon felt sorry for him, so he was his about only friend. Well, Dragon, if I were to get Rooster's coral antlers for you, what would you do for me? Oh, I will give you lots of legs so you could run very fast, and sharp jaws so that you could protect yourself, and I wouldn't have to protect you. Oh, good. Then I would be powerful, and all the other animals would have to listen to me. Don't you worry, Dragon. I'm going to get you Rooster's antlers. And off he went. Centipede, what are you doing here? Well, Rooster, Dragon is sad. You see, he has a bald head and he's so sensitive about it. He thinks if he could use your coral antlers, then no one would notice his bald head. And besides, Rooster, you are so beautiful already with your red comb and your shiny feathers. You don't really even need those antlers. Well, Rooster was a rather kind-hearted, generous fellow. Dragon is sad. Well, I suppose you're right. I don't really need these antlers as well. I'm so beautiful. All right. You can tell Dragon that he can borrow my antlers for as long as he needs them. Thinking very well that he was going to get them back right after the contest. So Centipede rushed back and gave the antlers to Dragon. Dragon put him on his head. He looked in the mirror. Oh, I am so handsome. No one's going to notice my bald head now. You promised, Dragon. Very well, Centipede. Climb into my magic jar. And Centipede climbed into his jar. And then Dragon put in some earth, some air, some fire, and some water, and then some of his own golden scales. And then he took the jar and he moved it to the north and the south and the east and the west, swirling it around. And then he hit a big gong. Bong! And when Centipede came crawling out, he looked like this, with lots and lots of legs for moving quickly and jaws that were sharp and powerful. Oh boy, now the other animals are going to be afraid of me. Now, Centipede, even though you are powerful, you must still be kind and modest. You might not be as powerful as you think. Now, on the day of the contest, all the animals arrived at the palace, and they all paraded around in front of the Jade Emperor. He looked at all his animals so carefully. Then he announced, I have made my decisions. Year number 1 will go to Rat for his cleverness. Year number 2 will go to Ox for his strength. Year number 3 will go to Tiger for her fierceness. Year number 4 will go to Rabbit for her gentleness. Year number 5 will go to Dragon for his wisdom. Year number 6 will go to Snake for his determination. Year number 7 will go to Horse for his swiftness. Year number 8 will go to Ram for his courage. Year number 9 will go to Monkey for her intelligence. Year number 10 will go to Rooster for his beauty. Year number 11 will go to Dog for his loyalty. And the final year, number 12, will go to Pig for her good nature. All the portraits of these animals will go up into the sky to shine with the stars. Now, all the animals who had won were so excited. They were congratulating themselves, all except for Rooster. He thought, Dragon was chosen number 5 because of my antlers. I was chosen number 10. If I had kept my antlers, I would have been chosen number 5, or maybe even number 1. Oh, he was so angry. He marched right up to Dragon. Dragon, give me back my antlers. Oh, no, Rooster. You told Centipede that I could keep your antlers for as long as I need them. I'm still bald. I still need them. But I promise, when I grow hair on my head, I will return the antlers to you. But you know, it's been 10,000 years and dragons have never grown any hair on their head. So I think it might be a while. Oh, you tricked me. But Dragon just went floating away into the clouds. So Rooster headed home. He was so angry, and he came upon Centipede. Centipede, it's your fault that Dragon has my antlers. But you said he could keep them for as long as he needs them, and he still needs them. Oh, Centipede, I am going to get you. And he started flapping his wings and pecking at Centipede. But Centipede didn't run away like he usually would. He just, with his legs, would run forward and back and forward and back, and he was clicking his sharp jaws. But that didn't scare Rooster at all. He just kept flapping his wings and kept pecking at Centipede, and Centipede realized that he wasn't as powerful as he thought. So he quickly ran under a rock and he hid and he stayed there until Rooster got tired and went on home. And that's why today roosters and centipedes are not friends. If Rooster sees a centipede in the barnyard, he chases after him and he pecks him and he eats him up. And to this very day, do you know that Rooster is still trying to get his antlers back? Every morning, just as the sun is beginning to rise, he flies over to a fence post, puts back his head and says, "Woo, woo, 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 woo! Dragon, give me back my antlers!" Dragon just smiles and drifts away in the clouds. And that is all. That's a fun version from China, I think. Little variation on the Great Race that a lot of people know. Okay, now I want to. I'm going to share a story with you from Japan. Even though nowadays Japan celebrates New Year's Day on January 1st, that didn't come about until 1873. That's when the Emperor Meiji suddenly declared that Japan would no longer be following the lunar calendar, they would be following the Gregorian calendar. So everything switched. But for thousands of years before that, they did celebrate the Lunar New Year. So I kind of feel justified in telling you this story. And before I do, there's a couple things that it's helpful for you to know. Now, are you all familiar with mochi rice cakes?
Mhm.
This is what the traditional mochi rice cakes looks like. I know some of you really are. What's become very popular nowadays is the mochi ice cream. With the ice cream on the inside, but the mochi is just this thin layer on the outside. And that's made by cooking a very short grain rice called pearl rice, and then it's put into a mortar. Now this is a miniature one. It's called an usu, but you can see how thick the walls are, right? And then, so the rice would be placed in there, and then it would be pounded with a wooden mallet called the kine. And so you have to envision this being quite large, right? Probably 18 inches or 2 feet across, and probably about the same height. And so here's a picture of, you can see the cooked rice in here. Here's the usu. Here's the kine, and you can see the people that are pounding it. So it gives you an idea of the scale of it. And so the rice is pounded and pounded and pounded and pounded. Someone has to stick their hand in there and flip the rice over, sprinkle water on it, and move it around so that it all gets pounded evenly. But after a while, you can see how much it changes. You know, it gets to be really quite sort of pillowy looking, sort of marshmallowy looking, but you have to think of like a really, really thick sort of a marshmallow because it's super stretchy and sticky. And then while it's still hot, it's formed into those mochi rice cakes. Okay, so this story is called The Mochi Race. Mukashi mukashi, aru tokoro ni, which means long, long ago in Japan, two friends met on a mountaintop, Monkey, yukiki, yukiki, and Bullfrog, ghetto, 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 ghetto. Monkey turned to his friend. Bullfrog, my old friend, do you hear the noise coming from the village down below us? And they could hear ka-tonk, 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 ka-tonk. That is the sound of people pounding mochi, because you know, soon it will be New Year's Day, Oshogatsu, and they say it's good luck if you can eat some mochi on New Year's Day. Then you will have good luck all the rest of that year. Now, don't you think that you and I can come up with a plan that we can get some of that delicious mochi for ourselves? So the two friends put their heads together and came up with a plan. and they hurried down the mountain. Now, Monkey, of course, was much faster than Bullfrog, so he got down to the village and he went over to the home of the village mayor. He pushed open the gate to the garden in the back of the home. He knew there'd be a big party of people there pounding mochi. And soon, sure enough, there was a big group of people pounding the mochi. Lots of little children were running around and playing. He left the gate open for Bullfrog, and he went and hid in the bushes. And after a while, boom, 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 here comes Bullfrog. He hops into the garden. He goes over to the pond, and then with a big splash, cha! He jumps into the pond. Huh? What happened? One of the children must have fallen into the pond. So everyone rushed over to the pond to see what was happening, leaving the usu of mochi unguarded. That gave Monkey his chance. He ran out of the bushes, he grabbed the usu, and he began running out the gate, up the hill, up the mountain, all the way back to the top of the mountain. And he waited and waited and waited for Bullfrog to get there too. And as he was waiting, he began thinking, why should I share any of this delicious mochi with Bullfrog when I did all the work carrying this heavy usu back up the hill? So when Bullfrog finally arrived, he turned to his friend. Bullfrog, my old friend, instead of us trying to divide this sticky mochi into two, why don't we have a race? We'll roll the usu back down the mountain, and the first one to catch it can eat as much of the mochi as they want. Now, Bullfrog knew that Monkey was much faster than he was, but Bullfrog was also very clever, so he agreed. And when Monkey wasn't looking, Bullfrog spit some water into the usu with the mochi and began mushing it around. This made the mochi far less sticky than before. Then, ichi, ni, san, they pushed the usu and began rolling down the hill, with Monkey chasing after it, yukiki, and Bullfrog behind, boom, boom, boom. Yukiki. But all that tumbling caused the mochi to be flung out of the usu into the bushes. Monkey didn't even seem to notice. He just kept chasing after the usu. Yukiki. But Bullfrog noticed. He saw what had happened, and he just hopped, boom, 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 right over to the mochi. And then with his long tongue, he began to eat the mochi. In the meantime, Monkey, yukiki, is still chasing after the usu. When it finally got down to the bottom of the mountain, he grabbed the usu, he looked in, and it was empty. What had happened to the mochi? Well, he very sadly started walking back up the mountain. Tobo. By the time he found Bullfrog, Bullfrog had finished eating all the mochi. And he turned to his friend Monkey. Oh, Monkey, what took you so long? I tried to save some of the mochi for you, but you were so slow that I had to eat it all. So that is why today, Bullfrog has such a big belly, because he ate all the mochi. Oshimai, that is all.
Oh, thank you, Linda. Those were so delightful.
Fun.
Absolutely delightful and educational. All right. Linda, do put the 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 website link, the URL for Storytopia on YouTube, so that you can go and listen to Linda and many other storytellers, including Rupa, right? Am I right?
Mhm.
And who's on this, who's here is one of the others who, and hear lots of wonderful, and see lots of wonderful stories and stories and activities. So check that out. And especially if you have grandchildren or kids or in your life, watch it with them. Okay. All right. Well, we've gone quite far over the Pacific Ocean for those stories. And now our next storyteller is going to bring us back to much closer to home, but further away. Well, I don't, not further away, but it's still back in time. And that's Larry Kluger, who is also known as Lariat Larry to many of us and many others. And Larry has told us many a wonderful historical story that he researches amazingly. And then as Bobby said up at the front, these stories get told in their own way, and we're going to hear Larry tell this one in his way. So please welcome Larry.
Thank you. Thank you. I have told this story at our swap before. I don't remember how long ago it was, but Liz asked me to tell it again because I may be telling it at Genre Tales. So here goes. The night was cold, and Josiah Wilbarger clearly realized the grim reality of his situation. He had no food or water, no clothing. Flies and maggots were at work on his bloody wounds, and there was no way he could make it back to his friend Reuben's home. Josiah knew the shade of the oak tree he lay under would shield him from the relentless sun the next morning. But another day, another half day in the Texas heat would finish him for sure. As he lay there, his thoughts drifted back 5 years to 1828. Back in 1828, Josiah traveled with his family 700 miles to Texas from Missouri. There was lots of free land in Texas. They settled along a peaceful river, and their nearest neighbor was 75 miles away. This was such a great opportunity for Josiah's family. Of course, he would miss family and friends back in Missouri, especially his sister Margaret. They were so close as children, almost inseparable. Josiah recalled how once they were trapped on the roof of their house during a flood. Margaret was so scared, but Josiah kept reassuring her, "Have faith. Someone will come to rescue us before too long." And of course they did. As they grew older, they never lost that closeness. They wouldn't go more than a couple of days without seeing each other. It was hardest saying goodbye to Margaret. Those first 4 years in Texas were very lonely for Josiah. But after 4 years, in 1832, a friend of Josiah's from Missouri, Reuben Hornsby, settled across the river from Josiah with his family. The two families visited each other often, and both their farms prospered. On one of those visits, in March of 1833, Reuben introduced a group of 4 men to Josiah who were interested in settling in Texas. Josiah agreed to show them around the countryside while Reuben remained at home. After several hours, while riding along Walnut Creek, they spotted a lone Indian, and they signaled to him to stop. They wanted to talk with him. That Indian, seeing 5 armed white men, fled. They still wanted to talk with him, so they rode after him. But They lost his trail at the headwaters of the creek, and the frustrated men turned back. Looking back on this, Josiah realized the Indian was probably suspicious and scared of the 5 armed white men. They should have considered that. But they felt their pursuit was innocent and they meant him no harm. When they stopped to rest, they tied up their horses, started preparing their lunch, and forgot all about their previous encounter with the Indian. Meanwhile, that Indian had gathered a number of tribesmen and stalked the white men to their camp. As they ate, the Indians attacked with arrows and gunfire. All 5 men ran for the cover of some nearby trees. First one man, then another, went down injured, hit by gunfire. Josiah went to the aid of one, but was hit in the calf by an arrow. He loaded the man's rifle and returned to his own tree for cover. Within seconds, he was hit in the other calf by an arrow. The 2 uninjured men ran for their horses as Josiah fought on. Seeing the 2 men fleeing, Josiah ran after them. A rifle ball struck him in the back of the neck, emerging from the left side of his chin. Frightened, and thinking that Josiah had been killed, the 2 uninjured men rode as hard as they could towards the safety of Reuben's home. Excited at their victory, the Indians fell on the injured to finish them off. They cut the throats of Josiah's 2 companions, but not his. Apparently, they felt his neck wound was fatal. They stripped the 3 men of their clothing and scalped him. Josiah was not dead, though. He was temporarily paralyzed. He was conscious during his terrifying ordeal and fainted shortly after being scalped. When he regained consciousness, it was late afternoon. Josiah realized his only chance for survival was to make it back to Reuben's home, 6 miles away. So he started crawling. He crawled 600 yards before collapsing under an oak tree, unable to go 1 foot farther. As he lay there, night fell, and he started thinking about everything that had led to this lonely end. His thoughts were stopped abruptly and brought back to the present when he heard the sound of someone or something. "Brother Josiah," said a soft voice beside him, "you are too weak to go on. Remain here, and friends will come to take care of you before midday tomorrow." Josiah's eyes widened in surprise, for there beside him was his sister Margaret, who he thought was in Missouri. When she was sure he understood what she said, she moved off in the direction of Reuben's home. Meanwhile, the 2 men who escaped made it back to Reuben's home safely with the tale of the attack. Both of them were certain that Josiah and the other 2 were dead. Reuben decided it was too late to retrieve the bodies. They would start back sometime the next day. That night proved to be troubling for Sarah Hornsby, Reuben's wife. She jumped up from a deep sleep, woke Reuben saying, "I dreamed of Josiah. He was naked, wounded, and scalped. I also saw Margaret, who told me he was still alive, but needed our help very badly." "It was just a dream," said Reuben. "Let's go back to sleep." The dream quickly returned, more vivid than before, and Sarah awoke in a cold sweat. "I know Josiah is alive, and I know where he is." Reuben gathered his men and started out before daybreak to find Josiah. They found him exactly where Sarah said he would be, and in the exact conditions she had described. They carried him back to Reuben's home, where he was nursed back to health. As soon as he was able, he asked about his sister Margaret. To his surprise, no one had seen her. It was not for some time that the news came. Margaret had died in Missouri, 700 miles away, on the same day that Josiah was attacked. If not for the love of his sister that had reached beyond the gates of death, Josiah Wilbarger would have died that day in the wilds of Texas. This is a true story. Thank you. This is a true story. In fact, I've seen drawings of Josiah Wilbarger 8 to 10 years after that with a severely scarred head. And I've seen this story several places. And they include the same things, that they were attacked by the Indians. Josiah was scalped and he was saved. People came after him and brought him back and saved him. Not all the stories contain a lot of details, but I like to believe the one that I found, in which his sister came back from the dead and saved him.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, Larry.
Great story, Larry.
A lot of details and told with such vividness, yeah. Like the heart and soul that you put into researching these things. It's like it comes through you and comes off the page.
Oh, thank you very much.
You know what I mean? Like you use, just like Bobby was saying, like, doing the research, but then bringing it through yourself. And that's what storytelling is about, I think. All right. Donna asks, how can anyone survive being scalped?
Just the voice is my, yeah. Just the skin is taken off, just the top layer of the skin is taken off. And they usually don't scalp the whole head, just like a strip. So like I said, it left a severely scarred scalp. But people can survive being scalped. Thank
you, Larry, and thank you, Donna, for posting that in the chat. I bet, you're probably asked that question that others maybe thought about as well. Okay, well, we were going to have another, some of you know, our friend Renu from India was going to be one of our storytellers, but unfortunately she was not she had a dental situation that made it so that she couldn't come. So Linda has volunteered to give us one more little story, and then Sally will,
Oh. Okay, so it's just me and Sally left?
Yeah. Am I right?
Oh, okay.
Did I forget somebody? Claire? No. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. I'm happy to share one more story. I've got a few more illustrations for you. This is a small miniature sculpture at the Asian Art Museum of a mago. So you can see the horse and the person that's leading the horse. And then there's this kind of basket-like contraption that goes over the back of the horse that he's able to then carry people or packages. And in this situation, his work, he's called a mago, right? So that's important to the story. And then also, this is a bowl of soba noodles that are usually, or quite often eaten by Japanese families as the last meal of the year. So it's called toshi koshi soba. Soba are the buckwheat noodles. This is a pretty fancy version of this. And the long thin noodles signify a long life. But soba noodles, if you've ever had 100% pure buckwheat soba noodles, they break real easily. And the idea is that, 1 year is completely separate from the next. And the idea is you're supposed to break from the old year to prepare for the new year, right? To have a clean break. And you're supposed to leave all, your sorrows, your troubles, your sins behind you with that old year and begin the new year fresh. Mukashi mukashi, aru tokoro ni, which means long, long ago in Japan, there lived a young man whose name was Taro. Now, when Taro's father died, he didn't have land to leave him, but he did leave him a horse, a rather old horse, and a very tiny home. So Taro used that horse to become a mago. And he was a very hard-working and honest mago, although some mago were known to be robbers. You know, they would steal from their clients if they were carrying them from one place to another, or steal the packages that he was supposed to be delivering. But not Taro. He was very honest. Well, it was the day before New Year's Day. And Taro thought, oh, surely some of the merchants are going to need me to deliver packages, or maybe someone will need to be transported to someone's home out in the countryside. I can earn some money today and then buy some mochi for myself and maybe some vegetables and a bit of fish. But first he cleaned his house. He did the big cleaning, his tiny little house from top to bottom, because you needed to clean your house and make it in preparation for Toshigami, the New Year god. Your home had to be quite clean. So he cleaned his home, and then he took his horse and he went down to the village. And then he walked the streets of the village very slowly, asking if anyone needed his services. He stopped into all the shops, but people were so busy shopping and cleaning their homes, and nobody wanted to hire him, even though he walked the streets of the village all day long. And then it started to get dark and cold, so he decided he had no choice but to go home. No mochi, no fish. And as he was walking his horse home through a lane of trees and the snow began to fall, he noticed an old man just huddled and shivering beside one of the trees. He thought, oh, here I am feeling sorry for myself, and here's this old man in worse shape than I am. So he went over and he picked up the old man and he put him on his horse and he carried him back to his little tiny hut. When he got there, he fixed some toshi koshi soba noodles for the two of them to share a bowl of these noodles. The old man said, Domo arigato. Thank you so much for your kindness. Surely the Toshigami will come and reward you for your kindness. Ah, doitashimashite. You are welcome, but I need no reward. And as they listened to the bells, the temple bell being rung 107 times in the distance, Taro put a futon, a thick mattress, on the floor in front of the fireplace. Let the old man lie down there, and he covered him over with another thick blanket. And then Taro went to sleep himself, listening to the last of the bell ringing. Now the next morning he woke up and Taro made some rice porridge for he and the old man. He said, Ohayo gozaimasu, good morning. Akimashite omedetou. Happy New Year. But the old man didn't move. So he said a little louder, Ohayo gozaimasu, good morning. Still the old man didn't move. What if he died in the nighttime? So Taro very carefully went over to this blanket covering this lump, lifted up the blanket, and there was no old man. There was an enormous pile of gold. For you see, the old man was right. Toshigami did come at night and bless him for his kindness. Oshimai. That is all. Thanks.
Beautiful, beautiful story of kindness and generosity. Sally, let's have Sally unmute herself. I'll mute myself. Take us out, Sally.
Unmute myself. Hold on. All right, there we go. Thank you, all the tellers, for your wonderful, wonderful stories, and so well told. I just was brought into every one of them. Just love them all. And I say to myself, I don't like folk tales. I don't. And then some wonderful tellers like yourself come before us, and I'm just pulled in. So I thank you very much. And Larry, here's a lariat for you too. Loved it. Thank you. Well, I'm going to take you out this evening with a very short story. And I can't remember, it says on my piece of paper that I thought of it in 2019. Now, for me to bring back something from 2019 is a feat in itself. And this story is called 5 Men. My husband, man number 1, called me stupid. And I didn't believe him, and I walked away. Now, work being a necessity, I went and interviewed with man number 2, my boss. And when I went for my review 6 months later, he told me I was professional. And I stayed with him for 20 years. Man number 3 laughingly called me Grace, and I became his dance partner. And man number 4 called me the joy of his life, and I went to live with him for 33 years. Now, man number 5, I met quite recently at a senior event, and he stood beside me, paunchy, without hair, a glass of beer or something in his hand, and he looked around the room. Have you ever seen so many old, gray-haired women? And then he looked down at me. Are you looking at me, sir? I use Clairol. And I walked away. 5 men. Good night, everyone. So good to see you. Stay for a few minutes and chat with us, won't you, please? All righty, we'll see you next.